It's just absolutely amazing. It's really, really, really good. So I was telling Tracy about the 17th of April. Many things will happen in April. This is really good. How are you? I know you're busy. Yeah.
Tracy, can you hear?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Are you asking me or Kent?
Yeah, yeah, I was just
Oh, were you asking me?
how
Adela,
are
I thought you
you?
were asking Tracy.
How are you to the world? Kent, you okay? I know you're all very
No,
busy.
everything's good. And by the way, Maria took Tracy's noodle making class last week.
I didn't know that existed. That's so cool.
Maria.
And I
Maria,
and I was
Maria, you're
able to
mute.
join at the very end and get some of the sample noodles.
Very cool.
This is
can take the show on the road now.
Maria, you
Maria,
are
you're mute.
muted.
You're mute, Maria.
I highly
No.
recommend it. It was fabulous. Tracy, it was wonderful. I really enjoyed it.
Well, it's easy to teach a great student, so.
Oh, this is so, so, so good. So whenever Maitane, ready
ready.
when you are. We're ready?
She's
Yes. So
she's getting people set up in the room there. Okay.
that is fantastic. So shall we do this introduction to this session number 5, which is going to be a fantastic, fantastic session because Tracy is with us. So welcome to Gastronomy and Beyond, session 5. Myself, the whole team, Luis will be hosting this Gastronomy and Beyond. Luis, how are you?
Fine, fine. But today we have Kent here, so I think it's much better to listen from Kent, and also he has a long-term kind of connection with Tracy. I mean, he loves her restaurant, and so I think today it should be Kent and you like introducing her.
I think I absolutely agree with you. I think it's an honor for me and for you, Luis, that Kent introduces Tracy. So
Okay. Well, I didn't plan on doing an introduction, but what the hell? I mean, I guess I would introduce Tracy this way. I mean, the restaurant Pagu is amazing. It's one of our go-to places, and the food is always great, and the people are great, and we like sitting at the bar, and we like trying new things, and we've had Tracy and the Pagu team cater our parties. But what is equally interesting, maybe in many ways more so, is the story of what Tracy did during the pandemic, and supporting the community. And I hope, Tracy, you can take some time and talk about that when you present, because I think the journey you went through when the pandemic hit, and how you rose to the occasion to really make a positive contribution to the community and help people in need, is equally important, to what you do with the restaurant.
Great.
So I think Tracy is just one of those inspirational chefs whose interests and impact go well beyond the food. So
Thank you.
Yeah, and she's now part of the City Science family because more and more often we are pulling you into City Science events. So thank you for that. Well, Adela, I don't.
yeah, I was going to say exactly the same. She always says, yes, let's go for that. So thank you so much, Tracy. And definitely, if this is gastronomy and beyond, as Ken says, beyond is what you do. So welcome. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your generosity. Ready when you are, Tracy.
Great. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I prepared some slides so people can see a little bit more visually some of the things we've done with the restaurant. So should I just go ahead and share those? Yeah. All right.
perfect.
Okay. All right. Can everyone see? Yes, the slides are good. All right.
Looks good.
All right. So I want to talk about food, community, and collaboration. Those are the core tenets of our restaurant. And when I was trying to convince landlords over 10 years ago to give me a restaurant space, to do the great ideas that I had in terms of food, and not just food, but what more a restaurant could do, it was really hard to kind of communicate that message to folks. But I think now that we've been around a little bit longer, and now that restaurants are not just restaurants and chefs are not just chefs, these are ideas that people have an easier time these days now in 2025 wrapping their head around. So a quick little bit of context. That's me. I'm maybe 2 years old here with my parents, one of my brothers, outside of my grandmother's restaurant. So I come from the restaurant industry in Cambridge, Massachusetts. My grandmother had opened a Japanese restaurant in the late 1980s, and she had been a midwife her entire life in Taiwan. And when she came over, she said, "I'm going to open a restaurant." And the rest of the family kind of thought she was crazy. But for better or for worse, she did it. And it really shaped who I am today. Um, I had been pre-med at one point. I have a degree in finance. It's called BS for a reason. But I went on to study at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris. I worked in fine dining. And a lot of that was because my parents wanted me to have this like higher education. They wanted me to become a lawyer or doctor, and instead I went back to these childhood and perhaps childish memories of wanting to be in a restaurant. And I always go back to this question, even now in my late 30s, of why as a kid did I want to be in the restaurant. I think it's important that everyone asks themselves that, what is it that draws you to restaurants or draws you to food establishments, right? Is it just the food? Is it the theater, right? Is it the bubbles on this fried oyster here? Um, and so, as a young cook, I thought I had to, kind of like prove myself to my parents, prove myself to my community, kind of build up this resume. I was very attracted to fine dining because I thought, fancy food was interesting. I thought flavor combinations were complex, and I was interested in kind of like new techniques and old techniques. But I soon realized that, my interests expanded beyond that. And overall, my interests were in trying to synthesize and rationalize my past with my present and with my future. So I know that sounds a little bit strange, but as a young kid, I always thought, what am I going to be when I grow up? But when I found the world of food, I kind of stopped asking that question. And I asked more so, what is it can I do with food? How can I communicate with food, through restaurants, to do more with the community, to do better, to compel others to join in the kind of food and restaurant world. And so, you'll see just this kind of like brief little resume here, that, these interests are sprinkled throughout the community in not just restaurant and food environments, but also with kind of a little bit of science here, as well as nonprofit and community work. And again, like when I was in fine dining, I kept being like, hey, why does food need to be so precious? Right? Of course, I appreciate the artistry and the technique and all the time. But as I became a business owner one day, I was like, I don't think food needs to be so precious, or at least I don't think my food needs to be so precious in order to do what it is that I'm interested in doing, in order to collaborate with who I want to collaborate with. So rewind a little bit. In 2010 or 11, science and cooking at Harvard was just starting. Perhaps this guy on the left here, Ferran Adrià, who used to be the chef of El Bulli, which was at one point the #1 restaurant in the world, right? And so through Harvard Science and Cooking, I think I was challenged as a young cook to think more about food, more about restaurants, more about chefs as communicators, as ambassadors, as innovators. And prior to that, I really just thought of chefs as cooks. And I thought, science is pretty cool, right? Like, why aren't people using science to cook better or better food? Or why aren't they using food to understand science better? And so, like Adela and Kent mentioned earlier, Maria came to my cooking class recently. So at the restaurant now, we've been around for 8 years or so. And on the weekends, we do public classes. On the weekdays, we do some private classes. And so, teaching food and a little bit of science through food has been fun and interesting, and apparently has attracted folks to come out of their offices at midday to take some classes. But again, to rewind a little bit, in my early 20s, when I was trying to again kind of prove it, I was throwing these dinner parties, and these dinner parties turned into these pop-ups, and these pop-ups became public, they became ticketed, affordable ticket for $35, you could get this: bao, ramen, and cookies, right? So it started with a bowl of ramen. It started with a dream to take over my grandmother's restaurant, a dream to make ramen kind of democratized in Boston, because at the time we didn't have a lot of ramen shops or izakayas in the Boston area. Now, fast forward to 2025, I think every neighborhood you might be able to get a bowl of ramen, but back then we couldn't. And so, I thought that was an interesting problem to solve at the time. And actually, I realized later that the problem was not just, okay, we can't really get a good bowl of ramen in my neighborhood, but it was, that people crave this food. They crave ramen because, remember the Momofuku boom in New York, the David Chang, kind of like rise of his empire. But more than that style of food, people were craving connection. People wanted a way to connect with other people, and food was an easy way to gather people. And in the form of dinner parties, in the form of private events, in the form of these kind of ramen pop-ups at our friends' restaurants. And so that was kind of my my kind of like thesis point when I was trying to prove it to these landlords. It took me probably 5 years to find the right location, to find the right landlords, and eventually, this is my dining room here at Pagu. I was able to open this beautiful, over 100 seats, about 99 to 120 seats indoors, another 80 seats on the patio, right on Mass Ave, close to Central Square between Harvard and MIT. Lots of pharmaceutical, biotech, tech companies in this area, also quite a bit of residential in this area. But how did I do this? It wasn't just me that convinced the landlords. The landlords are MIT as well as back then Forest City. But I actually threw a lot of dinner parties to get there. I had made friends with some MIT professors, and they happened to be headmasters down the street. And so we hosted a dinner for over 20 people, and we invited the landlords, who were about 6, including the real estate brokers on their team. And so we said, in order for you to understand this restaurant idea that we're trying to paint, that's more than just a restaurant, you need to come to one of our events. So we're going to throw this dinner party. So they're just kind of taken aback that we had taken over this grad school dorm penthouse where the headmasters live, and threw this great party to kind of show them, this is the cross section of this community. And here's an artist who's going to collaborate with a local mixologist, who's going to collaborate with an MIT professor studying quantum mechanics, and this is how they all make sense together. So somehow we were able to show them food community collaboration in a space. So they kind of got it, and they took a chance on us. I don't know if I would have taken a chance on me. I was like 28 at the time, and had never run a restaurant before, and here I was. But again, since then we have been teaching a little bit of science through cooking with hand-pulled noodle classes on the weekends as well as on the weekdays with companies as kind of team building activities, just to show, hey, a restaurant can also be a classroom. We've taken that show on the road, and we've done this in Paris. We've done it in Milan as kind of like a brand ambassador for the city of Boston to promote tourism in Boston. And initially, you know, I used to think, okay, restaurants, people want to come to restaurants because they want really delicious food. Yes, that is part of it. Like when I look at these carabineros on the left, like they remind me of Spain, and I want to eat them. They look really juicy, they look really tasty. Here we look on the right and we look at this kind of like large format roasted tuna collar. And so, you know, as a chef, not only am I putting my ideas on a plate, not only am I putting my creativity on a plate, but, you know, like there are things that I want people to know about beyond what are the ingredients in a dish. And so, you know, I want people to know that tuna is not just, you know, expensive, fatty tuna at an omakase restaurant, which of course you can get. But tuna, there can also be, you know, offcuts that people don't know about, like the collar. And there are other ways to prepare them that are very delicious. And therefore, we should be mindful as guests, as diners, as participants in this community to do our part when it comes to the sustainability of what we are eating, because chefs are responsible for being these kind of influencers, right? If we say, hey, this is cool to eat and I'm going to put it on the menu, and people start buying it, and this is, you know, an offcut like the tuna collar instead of the belly, then perhaps more people will appreciate eating something that one is more affordable, and two, in other regards, might just kind of be tossed, right? Like my fish supplier came to me and said, hey, we have all these tuna collars just sitting here. Can you do something with it? You know, people love to eat oysters in New England. So again, something kind of like visually dramatic is our squid ink oyster bao. We created this originally for a party that a block party that Barbara Lynch was throwing at B&G Oysters at the time in 2012. And to some people, it looks kind of like a black wallet. It's a little bit fun. People were kind of just learning about bows. I think at the time it became a little bit more mainstream, but of course they had never seen like a jet ink, you know, jet black squid ink bow. And this is kind of our take on an oyster po' boy. So if you're a little squeamish eating raw oysters, here you can have something a little bit more approachable, like our version of an oyster po' boy inside a bao here. And so, you know, is this innovation in 2011, right? Like baos in my historical context are a kind of steamed bun coming from China. My family's from Taiwan, and it's something that's just very available, just like on the streets as street food there, right? And here you can serve it in our restaurant, which is kind of casual-ish dining, and people are also serving it in fine dining. You know, and we want people to know that if you want to eat your oysters, then you have to take care of the environment that the oysters are grown in. And so more than just understanding restaurants as a place to transact and to come in and to eat something and pay for it, you know, restaurants are part of a greater web. Restaurants are a large part of the community. And in being a part of the community, it's important for us to listen to the community, listen to what people want to eat, listen to how people want to gather, understand who our demographics are, because there is not just one kind of target audience for us. And, you know, upon listening, collaborate with them, create with them, innovate with them. And so, for instance, if we love our oysters, and we want them to be around for a while, then we need to know about the ecosystem in which these oysters are growing. And there's an invasive species called green crab that are local to the New England area. And so these green crabs, for a lot of people, when they eat crabs, they want to eat the meat of the crab, right? You get like a king crab leg, like you want to dig into the crab meat and eat that. These green crabs, they don't have a lot of meat. Sorry. So what can we do with them? In fact, these green crabs have way more flavor when you make a rich stock, when you make a laksa stock, a bouillabaisse. And so they have more flavor than if you took the meatiest crab and just made a stock with that crab. So I discovered that and I started selling this green crab laksa at the restaurant. Sometimes we still have people saying, hey, where's the crab meat? But oftentimes people are so impressed with the richness of the stock and they like that there's protein still with the shrimp there, that they're happy with the dish. And so, our kind of simple message to folks is, if you love your oysters, you got to eat these green crabs too, right? These green crabs are invading the oyster beds, they're invading the kelp beds. And so, oysters and kelp are very good for the water and the water quality. And so if you want to continue to have this sustainable ecosystem, you got to participate and eat some green crabs. So Kent mentioned earlier that we've done some nonprofit work, and I, as a chef, again, like in my late 20s, opened Pagu, and I thought, oh, like once I've made it like 10, 15, 20 years later, like I'll have time to do like nonprofit work and that'll be like my reinvestment into this community, right? But boom, in 2020, just a few years into our existence, we kind of dug right into the nonprofit world, not because we knew much about it, because it came out of necessity. And I think this is a huge wake-up call for me personally as a chef, as well as to kind of other restaurants, really, that our responsibility as restaurants is to serve the community, but also the larger community, not just the folks who can afford to come to eat, but at the end of the day, everybody deserves to eat. Everybody needs to eat. And so the two initiatives that we started during COVID, one was Off Their Plate, and the other was Project Restore Us. But Off Their Plate started really as a way to feed frontline healthcare workers at the peak of COVID, and later pivoted to feeding community health centers, to feeding homeless shelters, and really utilizing this network of chefs and the chef networks of their suppliers, which at the time, if we weren't doing enough takeout, which no one was doing enough takeout, and if we weren't doing all these other side hustles of, suburban drop-offs or meal kits or online, cocktails to go, no one was really doing enough revenue at the time in those various revenue streams to sustain their businesses and to sustain their original team sizes. So a lot of people consolidated, they downsized or they furloughed employees or they just closed and either didn't reopen or reopened later, right? And they kind of sat on that, PPP money if they had it or other grant money. What we saw was an opportunity to, one, never close, and two, to understand and navigate, like, how do things work, right? Like, how can you raise money to feed other people? How can you raise money and put as much money towards the food, more money towards the food, while still maintaining a key subset of your employees? And so we created that model with Off Their Plate. We collaborated with World Central Kitchen as a physical sponsor, so we were able to do that nationwide. Then we said, there are aspects of what we're doing that are not totally sustainable in terms of having a closed loop system. So can we do something with a little more control and a little bit more locally that can be more sustainable? So then we did Project Restore Us, which was a different model, right? Off Their Plate was prepared foods, and those foods were very perishable. With Project Restore Us, we wanted to create something more sustainable in terms of not as perishable. Therefore, we switched to this grocery model, which when we presented to World Central Kitchen was, sounded like a nightmare for them because it's a lot more stuff to manage. And so perhaps, at a larger scale, it seems very challenging. Because we kept it local to Boston, we kept it to about 5 to 6 restaurants. it was for us more sustainable. So we were having our restaurant regulars who could afford to buy takeout, who could afford to, take time off of work to come help us. They were volunteers. They were volunteer drivers, packers, and we were filling the dining rooms of restaurants. And we were packing these grocery boxes for families in need, and therefore people who might think, okay, like I am an undocumented person who's not able to receive any kind of benefits from the government at this time, not receive unemployment, single parent households, COVID positive households, households with elders, etc., and a lot of BIPOC communities. So they would receive foods that were culturally appropriate. So whether they were Vietnamese or Haitian or Chinese or Latinx, they were receiving foods that they like to eat and not just kind of food pantry leftovers of, corn, canned beef hash that's super high in sodium. And so they were kind of delighted to receive these goods and also know that there were people looking out for them, that, 6 weeks later, like they might receive another shipment of goods. And so that was kind of thanks to our ability to partner with local community organizations who were already trying to solve these problems, but didn't have experience necessarily in food security or in kind of these logistics, that we had a network of volunteers that we were able to kind of figure out very quickly. So post-COVID, what do we do with that knowledge? What do we do with that, those relationships that we built? Because of course, we eventually reopened our restaurant to be a restaurant again. We have events again, we have weddings again. So we started this initiative called Roundtable. And so what Roundtable does is we continue these kinds of relationships and we continue building upon these networks and connecting people in terms of the haves and the have-nots, in terms of finding resources, whether they're physical goods or handshakes and connections to lead people to a next kind of possible venture with someone else to either buy their products or services or find them a volunteer opportunity or help them with legal counsel, etc. And so with the Roundtable organization, we have kind of redesigned like how people think about curated experiences in food and beverage. So for instance, if you're a company looking to host your annual fundraising gala, historically, you might just say, hey, I'm going to go to this big hotel. I'm going to hire this big hotel and all of their catering services, and not have to kind of think about it, right? Like they'll have an event planner, it'll be done. Now, I think some organizations are a little bit more mindful in how they spend their money. So, of course, they might need a big location like this big hotel, but they might say, hey, I would love to bring in some of these local BIPOC chefs to do some of the catering services. And so they tap us to see, okay, like, which kind of chefs should we be working with, or which kind of other industry leaders, because maybe it's not just chefs that we have within our network. And so we help them design for something a little bit more meaningful and something that has a connection to doing social good. Another thing that we're working on now is the Refugee Food Festival. So we did our first annual Refugee Food Festival in June. And so for those who kind of want to understand a little bit of the context, now since November, since the new administration, we've been finding that doing some of this work might draw some bad actors or might draw some of the negative attention. So we try to keep things very positive, always keeping things positive and always, painting them in a light of kind of amplifying other folks who might not have the platform, might not have the microphone. And so we celebrated this Refugee Food Festival by bringing together all kinds of volunteers, refugee chefs, and again, just gathering the community and throwing a block party. Sounds pretty simple. And it is, you can do it in your community. This is why we want to kind of like write the recipes to do these things, because a food festival for 200 plus, 300 plus might seem like a lot to bite off. but you know, we've also created smaller models. So we do a monthly supper club. And so if people are interested in kind of starting these kinds of initiatives in their you know, in their communities, they can get in touch with us. But our why and our kind of like ethos and motivation for doing this is because with all the nonprofit work that we did during COVID, we see opportunities as a restaurant to continue doing this kind of good work. And we look at the different opportunities, partner organizations, as well as just what is the community need right now. And for us, there's a huge need in the refugee and the BIPOC communities to have more kind of solidarity and have more, you know, networking. And so that is our why. And these are just some of the examples of, you know, the chefs, the countries that we've worked with, and that the things that we do for them, right? So in this photo, there's Ukrainian chefs here. They can't go back to Ukraine. They used to run a huge cooking school, right? Like you guys think the BCC is big, like these guys had like the BCC of Ukraine, right? And now they're here. They're here and they're working at, you know, small restaurant in Newton. And so, you know, they have all this ability to cook and to teach and to gather, but they don't have necessarily the space. And so we are connecting them with people and space and capital and resources, because in our network, there are people who want to help and to connect with them. So, you know, these cross-industry collaborations are really important to us because simply being a restaurant, simply being a chef, and being kind of in our own, you know, like silo of food would be limiting. And so we're really lucky to have these networks of students and universities nearby. We're really lucky to have, you know, just this interesting intersection of art and nonprofit and, you know, local farmers. So, you know, when it comes to the products and services that we offer, we continue to be curious. There are things that you can eat and drink every day in the restaurant that tell a greater story than what it might just appear to be at face value. One of the things that's particularly interesting to me right now from the product perspective is the sparkling tea. And this idea initially was because my friend Kuro, who was doing a master's at Harvard at the time on kombucha, who works with the guys in Spain who used to run Mugaritz, and now they have Ama Pet Nat Tea. You know, those ideas cross-pollinate from Spain to Boston still. And so now I'm like, hey, well, there's this bridge between, you know, Japan and Taiwan and here when it comes to the tea culture. And so I've been kind of experimenting thanks to Kuro sharing some of his ideas and recipes. And so I've been making these delicious beverages at the restaurant. Again, using the restaurant kind of as, you know, a laboratory, a workshop, you know, whatever you want to call it, because we have products that we can put forward here. We have ideas that we can put forward. And, you know, within one day, one service, we have data that we can gather, right? I think that's something that, you know, perhaps is a little bit admirable about restaurants, is that you can run experiments every day and have results immediately. And so whether those experiments are product-based, whether those experiments are kind of service-based or people-based, you know, I think it's important that we are designing because we are listening to what our community wants, right? For us, the sparkling tea world is something that is looking at non-alcoholic and low alcoholic beverages, which, you know, in the broader context of how we are eating and drinking in the United States and as well as internationally, is just becoming more popular to drink less alcohol. And so how can you, you know, create something delicious that is perhaps tea-based instead of, say, coffee-based, right? And I think that there's an opportunity for that right now. And so for those who might be in other industries, because I'm sure not everyone listening here is a chef or restaurant owner, the kind of so similarities between our industries, folks are designing and innovating every day in our neighborhood. And what's great is that, at some point they got to eat, and they, might come to Pagu and have a meeting with a coworker or enjoy a meal with a group afterwards. But I hope that people bear in mind, that there are ways that you can collaborate with people in food, with people in other industries, and that you can solve problems together if you're if you're getting out of your bubble, if you're getting out of like just working with folks in your industry. At the end of the day, for us, like these are some of the key lessons that we've learned. Like we are certainly better chefs and better restaurant operators because we collaborate with others in the nonprofit world, in the education and university world. And as you were saying earlier, I have a hard time saying no. That's something I've had to learn over the years. People will come to you and ask for things. Try to, identify, especially for kind of young entrepreneurs out there. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a young person anymore. I'm maybe like a medium medium person, but I still have to give myself the same advice, There will be people that come and they want to take and they want to suck, right? Like my friends say, these are vampires, and you got to say no to vampires, but you got to find people who are multipliers. Sounds really basic, right? But I think it's pretty good advice. And if you find those collaborators, I mean, the things that you can create together are just, beyond what you could have created alone. And so, for me, it's like going back to the pug, right? Pagu means pug, and pugs are curious, they're humble, they're playful. And so, when I wanted to think of a name for my restaurant, nothing really stuck, but my pugs kept looking at me and kind of tilting their heads. And so, whenever I find that I'm trying to problem solve, I'll talk to friends, I'll share a meal with them, but also I'll go back to my pugs and just, like hug a pug, cuddle them, and kind of think through what are those things I'm trying to solve. So, find yourself some good friends, find yourself a pug. um, but yeah, hopefully that's a good little there we go. A good little kind of rundown of some of the things that we've done at the restaurant. Think I fit it in the time there. But yeah, do folks have any questions?
Thank you so much. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you for sharing. There are so many, wow, so many good ideas. Food plus community plus collaboration. Definitely, this is beyond food. Restaurants are part of a greater web. And this is about listening and more. Thank you so much for introducing Roundtable and Refugee Supper Club. That is so interesting, so interesting. And I think there will be many questions. So, ready when you are. I don't know if there is any question.
Well, I have one, Adela.
Of course.
The
Thank you.
So walking through Harvard Square and cities all over the world, you see all these boarded up storefronts. Retail is changing with online shopping and the big brands taking over, and these smaller shops are struggling. But on the other hand, I've noticed that the smaller restaurants seem to be thriving. And in many cities, they're replacing these boarded up storefronts. And they're becoming, in some ways, the public living rooms of the city where people gather and form relationships. And I think it's so critical when so many people get pulled into this online world. And you dealt with this a lot in your presentation. You had the one quote, "A restaurant is a hub for sustainability, education, and social change." which I believe. But I guess my question is, how could this urban food ecosystem, the restaurants and markets and kitchens, really be imagined as a form of civic infrastructure? And even addressing isolation and polarization. And you've done this amazing work, but it's almost entirely bottom up, and that's
Mhm.
hard. So my question is, what would you like to see in terms of support and even public policy to make it more easy to realize that vision and take it to scale?
Mhm. Yeah, I think there are a few different factors that could really help, transform those empty restaurant spaces. Um, for restaurants to be sustainable, there's, of course, financial sustainability as well as, a host of different aspects of sustainability. But most restaurants fail because of poor financial management, or because of bad rent deals. So first and foremost, we need good rent deals in order to get good restaurants into those spaces. Otherwise, you just see a lot of, kind of big chains coming through who can afford to be in prime real estate locations. Um, and once you're able to get that rent deal as an operator, you need resources, you need training, etc. What's interesting about Massachusetts is that with Michelle Wu's administration, they have specific grants to replace those kinds of empty storefronts. I think there's an acronym, but they're called space grants. And then, in addition to getting that space, well, you need to know how to operate it so you don't just tank within the first year. And so another thing that's available in Massachusetts, I would love to see in more states, is they have a workforce, what is it called? Workforce empowerment program. And so you can hire folks with experience to help train your team. There's this there's this harsh critique of restaurant employees just being unskilled labor. But restaurants, we train, we employ, we feed, we convene, and we connect. And so restaurant employees are not unskilled. It's actually quite skillful, as Maria can tell you,
Mhm.
having taken the handful noodle class. But what's great about that grant is that there is support coming from the city of Boston that goes directly towards training your workforce. And that's beyond restaurant training, that's available for other industries as well.
Mhm.
Um,
Great. And how about going beyond that, support to do the kind of work you're doing in the community, the larger community, so restaurants become these, social
yeah.
educational hubs?
Yeah, so now people call them, I'm trying to stay like hip to what the kids are calling them these days. But there's third spaces, right?
Mhm.
Where,
Oh,
you're
we've been using that for 20 years.
So, you don't just call something like a cafe, right? But perhaps, Faro
Mhm.
Cafe in Harvard Square, which I think was started by some MIT kids,
Mhm.
is not just a cafe, but at night there's, artists who are performing, there's poetry slams, there's kind of like wine bar or non-alcoholic beverage type vibes, just different ways of convening and for people to share their work, right? Not just, okay, like this is a place where transactions take place and whoever's running the operations really gets to govern whatever happens. But really saying, hey, like I want to bring in this collaborator and they do this, and I bring in that collaborator, they do that. And oh, if I've never met you before and we've never collaborated, well, there's also possibility of something happening here for us and for them. I think that for kind of food service operators and for restaurants to understand how to do that, they have to be shown how to do it. Um,
Mhm.
and because running a restaurant is already so much work, you have to make it easy for them. So that's what we learned from doing the nonprofits was that if you say, you know, if you tell a restaurant how to make food for takeout, They say, okay, I know how to do that. But when you say, hey, like we need to cook food and deliver it to these hospitals, if you don't really break it down for them, telling them, well, this is what you already know how to do, and so you can do it, they don't know how to do it. Because a lot of people were coming to me during COVID and they said, well, how did you start off their plate? I said, well, I started it because I made food and I delivered it to a hospital. And I said, what are the problems we had, right? Like I ran a first, like a 1.0, I did a prototype. I prototyped the situation. I said, what problems might we have? What problems did we have? And what problems might we have? Okay, now if someone's going to do that in San Francisco, what problems might they have? Right. And so in order to have, restaurants, cafes, and these other kind of third spaces, if people have never done it before, and if they're already, like at capacity or overworked or burnt out, etc., they might not be inclined, right? But if you give them a recipe that's easy to achieve, if you say, hey, let's take it bite-sized at a time, let's run one event together. This is what it looks like. It's going to be a 3-hour duration. It's going to be this number of people. This is going to be this kind of ticket price, da 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 da, right? Then they're like, oh, okay, I can do that, right? You take it one step at a time. But it definitely takes some hand holding.
Adele, I'm sorry, I got one more question.
Of course, of course.
What do you see as the possibility of having, call it time shifted transformable restaurants? And what do I mean by that? I saw a lot of this in Shanghai, where a facility will shift functions during the day or tonight or weekday weekend. There's a new place in Harvard Square called Lowe's, and they have behind the curtain a performance space with a live band. But when it's only open as a restaurant, those curtains are shut, and so it can be it can be either all open in one big venue. It can have more intimate spaces for for lunch and brunch and dinner, et cetera. It could be, accommodate business meetings or, different functions or co-working. I don't know. How do you see that as important in the future?
I think it's important in the future. I think for those kinds of spaces to be successful, of course, who are the people that are operating it? What is the vision and what's the execution?
Mhm.
And also, do you have enough population density in that area to support it?
Mhm.
Kind of going back to the numbers problem. For a city like Shanghai, I was in Tokyo. I haven't been to Shanghai. I used to go to Shanghai almost every summer for about 10 years in around kind of 2000 to 2010. And there's a lot of people there. And
Yes.
bridges get built overnight. And so people really get shit done there.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of people living there. It's a very, very dense place. I was in Tokyo recently and I thought, wow, there's so many people, right? There's these high rises and they're all occupied, and therefore, how can all these tiny little spots exist um and continue to exist, right? Well, there's just the people to support it. Um, I think that's harder with, a place like Central Square. But looking at Harvard Square as an example, I think it definitely has the density to support more diverse programming of third spaces at a greater scale. I think you see that a little bit with the student center, even though it's not as dynamic in terms of programming, but there is like food programming at the base level. And then there's a lot of just kind of like study spaces there. But I think that the Coop is looking to do something interesting with their real estate that they have. They did contact me about, oh, how could we possibly, program X, Y, and Z that we want to do here? There's a bunch of different things we have in terms of ideas, but how would we bring that all together? So I do hope that, the future of, those types of spaces, that people kind of continue dreaming about them and continue kind of like designing and also just prototyping. Because if you're worried about, if you build it, will they come? Well, like do a test run, like throw a block party, right? Everyone knows how to throw a dinner party, I would hope. So, you can do small iterations of those things in preparation for something a bit more permanent.
Right.
Thank
So
you.
Luis, sounds like Tracy supports the upzoning for the Massachusetts Avenue corridor.
Totally.
Yeah, we received a message from Farnaz, and it says, "We need you in Canada, Tracy." I don't know if we have any more questions, Luis, anybody else?
Well, yeah, no, I know Marcus have a question as well, but very quickly, I really like the work that Tracy is doing with Roundtable and the communities, and we recently started talking with this NGO that is Equitable. I don't know if you are familiar with them. They are like they are working with communities, also actually with diverse communities where they have different cultural roots, and they through food and cooking on the street, like kind of like outdoors, let's say, they are kind of building community. And when Kent was talking about the food truck a few months ago, I started thinking, okay, what if we could connect these people, Equitable, with this idea of bringing food like in a more not permanent, as you say, everybody knows how to throw a party, a dinner party. So at this point, it's more about, yeah, maybe bringing into food deserts, or in communities that they are maybe not cement yet as a community. What if we could, through food, bring like a food truck or something and have this kind of party? So I don't know. I know that every time that we talk about the food truck, you are always on board, but but I don't know if you are familiar with Equitable and the work that they do, or um,
Yeah, no, I don't think I'm familiar with them, but I wrote it down so that I can look into it, and I'm sure I will ping you after this call to learn more about it. But that kind of thinking in terms of, hey, like we want to do a food truck and who do we want to serve, and here are folks that we'd be interested in serving, that kind of thinking is definitely similar to what we were doing during COVID in terms of, we have restaurants, and they know how to make food, they know how to pack food. They don't have anywhere to send it right now. Where could they send it, right? There's always people who are looking to eat, who are in need of food, and sometimes that's just around the block here in Cambridge. 1 in 4 are food insecure in Cambridge. And so, we didn't just say, oh, well, we're just going to take this food and go drop it off, right? We're going to go buy this food and we're going to go drop it off, right? We said, well, how can we get this food donated? Or is there food that people are looking to glean? There's excess food, right? Like food insecurity is not a result of not having enough food, but the way that food is moved, and food access, there's plenty of food that's growing in the world, right? It's just not getting to the right people all the time. And so it's more of a logistics problem. And so we said, okay, well, we have all these volunteers who are pretty good at using Airtable to kind of help solve these problems. And we didn't just say, oh, well, we're going to give them food that we want to feed them. We asked them, what do you want to eat? And then we asked the community organizations who had lists of people's names and families, et cetera, who said, I'm food insecure. I would like to have food delivered to my house. This is the primary language that we speak. These are the times that we're going to be home. And so we delivered those kinds of foods to their homes at those times. And so we were really just, like I said earlier, connecting the dots. We didn't say, oh, we know how to do everything, we're going to pay for everything, or, the money we've raised, like, paid for everything. We raised money, we accessed grants that were available. And we just kind of connected all these different dots. We said, oh, these are the folks who know who needs food and what kind of food they want. We'll ask them what kind of food they want. And we have this big volunteer network that can help, kind of fill in the other blanks, other, answers we're looking for. In your case, if you're like, hey, okay, here's this other NGO that we could partner with, So if they have, either access to capital or if they have data on which areas are food deserts that they want to target, okay, well then we have, here like the chefs on board, or we have the designers on board, that'll handle some of the logistics or handle, X, Y, and Z. I think that you can find a nice kind of symbiotic relationship there. If does that sound like
Well,
what you're
yeah,
thinking?
yeah, sounds very good. Let's
Yeah.
follow up in some point, but this is good. This is good.
Thank you so
Right.
much. I think Marcus, you do have a question, yes? We do have time for that question.
I mean, I
I'm
had
always
a
happy with
very
your
quick question.
questions.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have a quick question. I love, as someone who frequents your restaurant pretty often after I was introduced to it by Maria and Kent, I get the dimension of education and the dimension of the culinary experience, but sometimes I was wondering, like, how do you feel you're communicating the Pagu's outreach in the restaurant space? Like, whenever I eat there, I've never known about all these other extra, which is
All the things that we
to
do.
me like
Yeah.
a missed opportunity.
Yeah. No,
But
I agree.
question,
Yeah. No, that's a good question. Sometimes when you come to eat at the restaurant, it's not obvious that we do all these different things. And that's like a big problem on my part in terms of like, I gotta do a better job of creating like, the visuals and etc. Right? Like I'm so busy as a chef, like with my head down. And this is a problem with some of my favorite restaurants, to be honest. The chefs are so busy making sure that the food tastes good that they're not out there promoting that the food is great. Does that make sense?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so I have that similar problem where I'm like, okay, like I'm too busy, working on the refugee food festival that I've forgotten to be like, hey, we did this, we already did this because we're already working on like the next one. So I think Maggie earlier was saying how busy she was because she finished that and is working on the next thing. And so yeah, I gotta do a better job of that. We have a few different kind of like design ideas to like transform one of the walls to be kind of like a like when you walk into a museum and you have kind of like visual storytelling with like small captions to kind of visually show like who are some of the people of Pagu and partner organizations, etc. I want to create just like a pocket zine, whatever the young people are calling it these days,
Yeah.
to show kind of almost like a little comic book format of some of the work that we've done. So again, these kind of like bite-sized like storytelling that can be, digital, virtual, that can be physical, in person, in your pocket, as well as just like redesigning like the menu so that when you come in, you have more awareness that this is a space that does more than just make the ramen and the bows here. That does more than just care about invasive green crabs that we put on the menu.
Yeah, because I wonder if you'd get a lot of patrons who would want to get involved.
Yeah.
That would be the lure there, I guess. That's what that was what I was thinking.
You're
But
right. You're totally right.
that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you so much. We all want to thank you, Tracy. That has been absolutely amazing. And this is definitely about community. So thank you, everybody. This is session 5. And let me introduce you to our next guest, Jocelyn Brown Hall. She will be with us November the 18th. She's the director of the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, Liaison Office for North America, a specialist agency of the United Nations. And the title of her talk is The Future of Food is in the Hands of the Youth. So this is for November the 18th. And today, Tracy, you've been fantastic as usual. Thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you for your time. Thank you for everything, Tracy. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. It's absolutely fantastic to see you again.
Great.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everybody.
Tracy. Thank you, Adela.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you.